Well, in 1973, I was a postdoc in molecular biology at Columbia University. And it was a time really of a lot of intense discussion. I had a lot of friends who were postdocs. Subjects came up naturally. And I just happened to come across a copy of the Wistar Symposium that was held in 1966 in Philadelphia. It's a collection of essays about Darwinian theory. And I read Murray Eden's article, a critical article about Darwinian theory, and Marcel Schutzenberger's critical argument about Darwinian theory. And I started talking about it with the other postdoctoral fellows, people who were working in the laboratory at the time. And I discovered, somewhat to my own surprise, that the arguments, which seemed so very credible, very important, went virtually unanswered among the biologists that I knew, who tended to dismiss the arguments in a way that suggested that they hadn't really understood them, and if they had understood them, were not prepared to respond to them. And that was the beginning of my skepticism about Darwinian theory. When I spent a year in Paris working with Schutzenberger, of course, both of us enriched each other's opinions. Schutzenberger had been a long-standing critic within the French biological establishment of Darwinian theory. And what he had to say reinforced what I had to say, what I had to say reinforced what he had to say. Later I talked with Murray Eden. There were a group of us who were similarly skeptical. I must say in the 70s, in the late 60s and in the 70s, there was a much more intensive degree of opposition to Darwinian theory, a much greater willingness to examine Darwinian orthodoxies. The great counter-reformation took place in the 1980s and the 1990s. So when I started work, or when I started thinking about these issues, Schutzenberger and I wanted to write a book together on this. There was a very relatively liberal attitude among mathematicians, people who were interested, physicists, people who were interested in Darwinian theory, a much greater willingness to wonder whether any of this could possibly be true. So that was roughly my own background, my own approach to it. Well, the claim that all skeptics about Darwinian orthodoxy or Christian fundamentalists stands refuted by me. It's obviously not true. I'm neither Christian nor a fundamentalist. But lots and lots of people are skeptical in the scientific community. I know dozens of mathematicians who scratch their head and say, you guys think this is the way life originated? It's absolutely a preposterous theory. And many, many very significant figures. John von Neumann, one of the great mathematicians of the 20th century, just laughed at Darwinian theory. He hooted at it. So it's perfectly absurd. This is a point in a polemical dispute. It's not a reasonable standard of criticism. Opposition to Darwinian theory is, I wouldn't say widespread, but there's a consistent group of people among mathematicians, among physicists, among some very good speculative biologists who simply don't accept it, don't even regard it as a scientific theory in any reasonable sense.